Marcus Papadopoulos is a historian, political analyst, and author who joins us. Maybe you can spell this out for us, what we're looking at, because from the vantage point of Russia, it's the U.S. that perhaps is the one that's provoking the idea of using nuclear weapons.
Well, like how NATO continued to remain in existence following the end of the Cold War, American nuclear weapons in Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Turkey continued to remain there, including to this very day, following the end of Soviet communism in 1989 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why, despite the end of Soviet communism and the dissolution of the USSR, has America retained its nuclear weapons in Europe? Well, it is my submission that the reason why the Americans continue to have nuclear weapons in Europe is to ensure that America remains politically, economically, and militarily in Europe, and that Europe continues to remain in the stranglehold of Washington's. Indeed, we can say the same about NATO. The very reason that NATO was established in the first place was to keep the Americans in Europe, the Germans down in Europe, and the Russians out of Europe. Despite how destabilizing American nuclear weapons are in Europe, the Americans nonetheless will continue to keep them there because, as I said moments ago, it is a way of preserving American influence and power in Europe.
So if we were to take a look at the possibility of any type of breakout, do you see the U.S. as being, well, in terms of the countries that that are hosting these nuclear weapons, using that as a threat? Because it sounds like some of the rhetoric coming out of Washington may point towards that.
The level in relations between Washington and Moscow is quite simply atrocious. Indeed, the level equals, if not surpasses, some of the very hot periods of the Cold War, such as in 1962 and in 1983. And there is absolutely no reason as to why the Americans should have nuclear weapons in Europe, especially at a time when relations between the two nuclear superpowers in the world, America and Russia, is at an all-time low. But of course, the Americans will continue to maintain their argument that American nuclear weapons in Europe help to defend the European continent from the perceived Russian threat. Indeed, that was Washington's argument during the Cold War, that American nuclear weapons in Europe helped to defend Europe from a perceived threat emanating from the Soviet Union. The Americans know very well that in order for them to maintain their stranglehold on Europe, America has to retain its nuclear weapons in Europe. Now, does that mean, of course, that the chances of a nuclear exchange between Washington and Moscow will increase? No, I don't believe that. Why? Because ever since the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, there has been a hotline, not just between the White House and the Kremlin, not just between the high commands in America and in Russia, but also between the high commands of the nuclear forces in America and the high command of the nuclear forces in Russia. The Americans and the Russians speak to each other on a regular basis, year on year, even before the crisis in Ukraine began, which was 8 years ago. So it is true that American nuclear weapons in Europe are not conducive to America's stability, and the real reason for them being in Europe is to preserve America's stranglehold on Europe. But at the same time, I do not believe that they will increase the chances of a nuclear Armageddon. Why? Because the Americans are acutely aware of the doctrine during the Cold War, mutually assured destruction. If America was to use nuclear weapons on Russia, Russia would use nuclear weapons on America. Both countries would be destroyed, and in the process, they would take the world with them.
We'll end it there. Thank you, Marcus Papadopoulos, historian, political analyst, and author. Many thanks.